So let's jump in. It is lovely to see you all. Welcome to our next session of sustaining practices for Perilous Times. We are delighted to have Imam Sohaib Sultan and Dean Matt Weiner with us, both from the Princeton Office of Religious Life. Two wonderful people. This is a chance just to gather for 20 minutes once a week, or sometimes this week twice, to hear from excellent folks about the kinds of practices that are sustaining them right now. We are hosted by the Bucknell University Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, Vassar College Office of Religious Life and Contemplative Practices, and the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab. We will turn it over to Sohaib and Matt here in a moment to share with us what is keeping them grounded and connected during these moments of time. Thanks to everyone. Oh, and additionally to our newly named Singular Professional Association, AXL, taking care of our college and university chaplains across the country. I don't think I need to say anything else about Sohaib and Matt, except that if you haven't read Sohaib's blog regarding his recent journey with life and faith and chemotherapy, it is beautiful and faithful and well worth some moments during your day or week, but not right now when we get to hear right from the source. So I'm going to put myself and others on mute. Sohaib and Matt, you may need to unmute yourselves again here in a moment, and I'm going to turn it right over to you. Take us away.
Greetings of peace and blessings, everyone. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise belongs to the Lord of the universe, and we send peace and blessings upon all the great prophets and messengers, sages and saints. It's so nice to be with all of you today during this moment for us to reflect and to meditate together. I was so grateful and excited when Kurt reached out to me about this idea to share something from our community and our chaplaincy regarding how to find peace during our time, these difficult times that we're in. And it feels really nice to be gathered with a group of chaplains who kind of understand the work that we all do and are also seeking to be grounded. I think as we try to ground our students and people in our community, we have to be grounded. Without that, there isn't going to be that ability to ground others. You can only give what you have. And so the story that we want to share is that my wonderful colleague and friend, my brother, Dean Matt, whose office is right next to mine at Princeton University, we're often exchanging notes and thoughts and, just catching up during the middle of the day and thinking about how we can improve the lives of our students and our community. And one of the things that we noticed maybe over a year ago was that there were a lot of students within the Muslim community who, were anxious, or people who were experiencing, depressive symptoms, people who were experiencing high stress around the social, political, environmental considerations of our time. And of course, as Muslims, we have things like the 5 daily prayers, and we have other meditative practices. But a lot of students hadn't been introduced to what we would call more, meditation as a proper practice unto itself. And oftentimes there's this misnomer within the Muslim community that things like meditation or other words that are used for it nowadays are things that emerge out of the Buddhist or out of the Hindu community, and that there isn't a Muslim equivalent to it. And the reality, though, is that within Islam, there's this, entire spiritual field that is called Sufism. And Sufism is very much into this idea of what's akin to meditation, sitting with your thoughts, sitting with your feelings, sitting with your emotions. And there's a heavy emphasis on placing a lot of value over the breath and placing value over this idea of being ibn al-waqt, which means to be a child of the moment. To be a child of the moment means to really be able to be grateful for what you have in this very moment, rather than allowing your mind to go this way or that way in the past or in the future too much. And along with that, there's a chant. There's this idea of chanting, and so Matt and I started, talking about this. We started talking about Buddhist practices and Sufi practices, and it just kind of occurred to us that wouldn't it be cool if we tried to do this thing where we brought students together, and we were able to introduce them to practices within the Buddhist and within the Sufi traditions that were focused on mindfulness, that were focused on silence and breathing, and also focused on the rich tradition of chanting and what that does for the heart. And I think at the heart of our conversations has been the heart, how to bring the heart at peace. And so we tried a few different iterations of this. And we eventually came a few months ago to settle on one very particular type of meditation in which Matt and I kind of exchange positions, where Matt leads us through breathing and I lead us through the chanting. And the focus is really on peace. That's where we saw people really wanting, the meditation to focus on, where students were really at. They wanted peace in their lives, and they were trying to make sense of peace within their family relations, within their friend circle, within their own relationship with God and the environment. The theme that kept emerging was this peace and this lack of peace and this desire for peace. And so, we eventually decided to stick to the script and to have this one thing that we come back to every single week. And so now, fast forwarding into the COVID and coronavirus era, we continued this tradition over Zoom, and on Mondays at noon, we gather a group of people together. And what's been really cool is that some of the students have continued on, but another community that has joined, which we didn't expect initially to join, but has joined, is the alumni community. And so this has become a really great resource for especially the Muslim alumni community. They're really into it, and they look forward to Mondays at noon to meditate with Dean Matt and I. And so I'll let Dean Matt in here, and for him to say a few words about Buddhist breathing meditation and how that's been incorporated into our weekly meditation, and then also a couple of words about the words that were chosen for our meditation, and then we'll do a short practice just to cap it off. So Dean Matt, it's all yours.
Just briefly, it seems these days that mindfulness is kind of like latte. Everybody's doing mindfulness or something, and so that's beautiful, and it's also a problem because it can be wishy-washy, or people just kind of do it without thinking about it much. One of the real values of this project for me has been just paying very careful attention to. I've been meditating for 35 years and doing this practice for 35 years, and when I'm doing it with someone who wants to do a Sufi practice along with it, what does that do to my understanding of it? How do I shape what I'm going to do and think about? If I'm doing it with someone who's thinking very differently than I am, but is on a very deep spiritual path, equal to mine, parallel to mine in some way. And then just the second thing to say is that meditation gets thought about as something you do by yourself. And Buddhistically speaking, we don't get anywhere on our spiritual path unless we have friends. We can't get anywhere without friends. And so this project for me has very much been about friendship with Imam Sohaib, and us figuring out together, what are we doing here? We have these parallel spiritual paths that we're on. We have a community of students, and kind of digging into this and figuring it out as we go. And very much as Imam Sohaib was saying, normally in Buddhist practice that I do, we don't talk about it as heart-based meditation, but actually we can. The Pali is there for it, the words are there for it. And so it's really kind of a remarkable journey for the two of us.
Yeah, it really has been a remarkable journey. I feel like, Dean Matt and I, our connection has, even grown even stronger since we've been doing this on a weekly basis. And, we can kind of pick up on how how each of us are doing each week, just because I think we're more in sync, our souls are more in sync. And so if you look at the screen share that I've put up here, you'll see that it begins with a breathing meditation that Dean Matt leads. And then after that, we go into a chant. And the chant is Ya Allahu Ya Salam. And it's acknowledging God as being the source of peace. And it's one of the names of God in the Islamic theological and philosophical tradition. And so just grounding ourselves in the names of God is a very important Sufi practice. And the idea is that the names of God are the names that our souls recognize as being our own names. They form our own spiritual identity. And therefore, when we invoke God's names, we're invoking the identity of our soul. And in that, the soul finds a lot of comfort. And so that's the first part of the meditation. And then Dean Matt takes us back to a breathing meditation, and in which he guides us in terms of how we should be following our breaths. And then we have these 3 lines from the Quran that we chant 10 times each. The first one is, "Oh God, you are the peace, and from you is the peace." This is a prayer that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, would in fact make every single time after each of his 5 daily prayers. And so the Arabic is Allahumma anta salam wa minka salam. And so chanting that 10 times. And then there's a verse from the Quran that talks about this idea that when the souls enter into the garden of paradise, the angels will greet them saying peace, a word from the merciful guardian. And so imagining what it's like to be surrounded by the angels, who we believe to be a very much present reality in our lives, saying Salamun qawlan min Rabbir Rahim, and saying that 10 times. And then the third chant from the Quran is actually this really brilliant spiritual moment in which the people of Abraham turn against him, and they tie him all up, and they are about to throw him into a pit of fire to get rid of his preaching. And God says, "Oh fire, be coolness and be peace." So there's this idea that, we're all living through fires, right? We're all living through the stresses of our time. We're all living through sicknesses, through illnesses, through trials and tribulations and stresses. And here it is that God says, "Oh fire, be coolness and be peace." So that is Qulna ya naru kuni bardan wa salama, right? And saying that 10 times. And then Dean Matt takes us back to a breathing meditation. And after that, we cap it off at the end by sending peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad. And in Sufi spiritual practices, the idea of sending peace and blessings upon the spiritual ancestors is really valuable, because there's this idea that our peace and blessings are directly sent to them, and that the spiritual ancestors actually receive them and respond to those peace and blessings by saying wa alaykum assalam, and peace be upon you. And so there's this idea that you're connected to your spiritual ancestors when you send peace and blessings upon them, and you receive their peace and blessings in return. And that does something very beautiful and very enriching for the soul. So given that this is meant to be a really short thing, we won't be able to go through the entire meditation. But Dean Matt and I thought that we'd just give you a taste and encourage you to join us just for the first part of the meditation, where Dean Matt will take us through a breathing and we'll do Ya Allahu Ya Salam. And so if you want to participate in that, just to get a taste of how it feels, you're welcome to do that. So Dean Matt.
Please close your eyes. And allow your eyes to soften, the muscles around your eyes. Allow your mouth to soften. Feel the softness between your lips as they touch each other. As a way of softening your mouth. And release your tongue muscle. The tongue holds a lot of tension. Allow it to soften down your throat. And then as breath comes into your body, allow your chest to soften. And as you release breath, just let it release all the way out. Breath coming in, softening your chest and your shoulders. And then releasing on the way out, letting breath release all the way out. As breath comes in, softening. And then just letting everything release on the exhale. Breath releases, body releases, the heart releases. Softening the chest as breath comes in. Releasing the chest, your shoulders, your face, as breath releases.
Try to remain as still as possible. Place your right hand upon your heart. Feel the synergy between your hand and your heart as you allow your hand to mold your heart and make it a recipient of God's loving peace. Ya Allahu Ya Salam. 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 Ya Allahu Ya Salam, Ya Allahu, Ya Salam, Ya Allahu, Ya Salam, Ya Allahu, Ya Salam, Ya Allahu, Ya Salam.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. That's what we have to share today. Thank you for letting us share.